Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for being here today. No better topic to be discussing on my birthday than broadband, something that Iowa is desperately in need of. So glad we're having this. And I don't need to rehash exactly what all of my colleagues are saying about the fact that we need to make sure everybody in this country has broadband. Listening to Representative Gammack there in northern Florida, it's no different than it is in Iowa. And of course, this pandemic only exacerbated the issues that we're facing when we don't have connectivity across this country. I've had the opportunity to spend the last couple of years working with the Rural Broadband Task Force to put together our bill that's being included in the infrastructure package to bring broadband investment of $100 billion across this country, and to address my colleague Kat Gammack's concern, also getting to those mapping issues. So a very solid bill. One thing we've spent a lot of time talking about in this task force is that we've got to future-proof it to make sure that we've got agreement with providers to continue to support it so that nobody falls behind again. As we look to investments like this, I'd like to focus a bit on how we can better coordinate and share information across the federal broadband programs. I think we've got about 50 different programs right now, and we've got state programs. I spent a decade in state government actually talking about this way long ago. And I'm glad we've got the Access Broadband Act, which we passed last year, of course, to help us with this. But we've got a lot more work to do. And when I was working at the state, as I mentioned, the lack of coordination across those programs was literally one of the biggest issues that was so frustrating for us to make sure everybody had broadband. And I'm glad that the task force that we put together points out that we've got to have required coordination between federal and state programs. So, Mr. Johnson, I believe you said in your testimony that your co-op has used FCC broadband funding, but not USDA's programs. I'm wondering if you could share one thing that you think the FCC does well that we could bring over to the USDA and vice versa.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. The simplest answer to that, and most direct, is that it's easier. It's simpler. The maps are generated in the RDOF program by the FCC. They distribute them to everybody. They specify available grant dollars that will be available, and they conduct a reverse auction according to strict rules. Fair playing field for everybody. We feel that fiber and 100/100 service should be favored as it is, but the fact is the application is much simpler. The process is simpler.
So any thoughts on what the USDA is doing or could be doing better, or is that the one suggestion we should be taking from the FCC?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are others, their package, their loan grant packaging is, relatively speaking, not as desirable to us. The applications themselves give a point system allotment to passing libraries, community centers, things of this nature. And we're talking about rural here. So that's where our libraries are in the communities that are already served. So putting extra points into a system for that type of, a farm should be perhaps get extra points, if you understand what I mean.
I like that idea.
Right. And I think the process is slow. The funding that's granted, once it's awarded, it takes, we have a specific co-op that took over 500 days to get their first money. That's
Okay, thank you. Mr. Prather, I'd ask the same question to you. You talked about providers spending 2 years and I think $250,000 just to get a loan from the USDA. Is that one of the biggest things that we need to address, is the efficiency of it, or do you have other suggestions that we could move from one program to another to help us?
That's another great point, and I would second what Mr. Johnson said. It is a much more difficult application process. We actually have some private loans because those were much easier to get than going through the full RUS process. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. One thing I think everyone in broadband has heard a ton about is the issues with mapping. Rep. Gammack brought it up. The FCC is currently updating their maps, and there's other efforts in states like Iowa as well. Last question, Ms. Prather or Mr. Johnson, do you think we could benefit from improving the coordination of maps we use to determine where to put the funding? And could we get a really good set of maps there that both the USDA and FCC and NTIA could all use together?
Very quickly, I think using one definition for underserved or unserved will go a long way in helping that coordination too.
I agree. Yes, I think one agency perhaps could be the clearing agency for all the data. I don't know which one.
If I'm hearing you all correctly, we need coordination in moving this forward. It will create a more efficient and effective structure to roll this out across the country. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you.